Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my first looks review of the Leica M EV1, a 60 megapixel full-frame camera that takes M mount lenses and is the first in the M series to employ a built-in electronic viewfinder. An EVF on an M? Blasphemy! But don't worry, rangefinder fans, the EV1 does not replace them, nor does it break tradition by offering frivolities like IBIS, video, or autofocus either. Now, jesting aside, a photo-only camera with manual focusing and rangefinder composition remains the essence of the M series, and for good reason. It's been that way for many decades. But a model with a built-in EVF has now been introduced for those photographers who want more accurate composition when using very wide, long, or indeed macro lenses, and easier focusing when having a very shallow depth of field. And some people may also just simply find it easier to use. So the EV1 has been designed to open up the M series to photographers beyond the traditional focal lengths that are associated with it, and apparently Leica has had many requests for an N camera with a built-in EVF. Note that Leica does actually make an optional EVF accessory that slides onto the hot shoe of the M11 and I think the M10 too, and this can also tilt vertically, nice. But of course it does break up that nice flat top surface, and as you'll discover, the built-in EVF on the EV1 is not only more neatly integrated into the corner, but delivers a more detailed picture too. Announced in October 2025, the M EV1 costs around £6,800 or $9,000. And as always, for Leica products, viewers will already be split between those who think that's actually quite reasonable value, or those who think that is simply insanely expensive. For members of the latter category, I'll point out right now that you can enjoy the same resolution in a compact body with the Sony A7CR for almost 1/3 the price, with autofocus, IBIS and video capabilities, although the viewfinder isn't as good. Or for less than half the price, the A7R5 again matches the resolution of the EV1 and sports autofocus, IBIS and video, but this time with a much better viewfinder, albeit in a larger body. And if you like the look and rendering of Leica M lenses, don't forget that you can also adapt them to most mirrorless systems, including Sony's, although I do believe that Leica optimizes the micro lenses on their sensors for the optical design of M lenses, so it should deliver a better result. Plus, some people just simply prefer Leica's image processing over others, although if you're into adjusting RAW files, you can get them pretty close. Ultimately, like most high-end luxury products, most people have already made their mind up on value, both in terms of feature set and what the item and that brand actually means to them personally. You either get Leica or you don't. It's my job to point out the alternatives and to show you what it can do, so let's now have a look around the body. The EV1 is immediately recognisable as a Leica M camera with familiar styling based on the M11. Measuring 140 by 80 by 38 mm and weighing 484 grams including battery, is compact and feels solid with no visible screws or evidence on how it's held together. It's actually a little bit lighter than the M11 thanks to the EVF, but it shares a similar feel with the metal construction and leatherette finish. Leica doesn't quote dust or splash resistance though. There's no front grip and only a mild thumb rest on the rear, but the textured surface does provide sufficient purchase to hold the camera pretty securely. But the absence of an optical rangefinder means the upper corner of the front is now missing a window. Leica optimistically calls that a purist front, but like Fujifilm's GFX 100RF, I personally feel that it looks a little less interesting from the front as a result. Note that Leica's Q3s place their logos in the corner, which does fill that space a bit more neatly, but as an M model, the EV1 wears its logo proudly in the middle. Otherwise, it's business as usual. To the right of the M mount is a lever, which on this model switches between focusing assistance or digital zooms. Actually, you can customize the function by pushing and holding it in position for just a moment. By default, pushing the lever towards the lens toggles focus peaking on and off, while pushing it outwards switches to a magnified view, which can then be adjusted by 2 levels using the rear dial. Peaking and magnification greatly help with manual focusing, whether you're using the screen or the viewfinder, and you can also configure the camera to enter a magnified view as soon as you start manually focusing the lens if preferred. To the right of the hot shoe on the top surface is the dedicated shutter dial running between 0.004 of a second and 8 seconds with clicked half stop intervals. The flash sync speed is 180th of a second, and there's a B position for long exposures up to 60 minutes, and A for automatic shutter speed control. An electronic shutter option extends the shutter speed range from 60 seconds to 16,000th. To its right is the shutter release, threaded for vintage cable releases and surrounded by a chunky power collar, both of which feel very positive in operation. And finally, at the end, there's a customizable function button. In the upper right corner on the rear is a small thumb wheel that can be customized and pushed to click, and below this is a joypad but no joystick. In the middle is a 2.95-inch touchscreen with 2.32 million dots, but it's fixed in position, so no tilting or angling out here. Pressing the center button within the joypad cycles between shooting details or a clean view. To the left of the screen are 3 chunky buttons: play, a function button that again can be customized with a prolonged push, and menu. Pushing menu switches the live image for a quick view of the most common settings. You can then use the joypad or the touch screen to select and adjust these. Pushing menu again enters the main menu system, starting with a favorites page, before then cycling through 5 additional pages of settings. Now, compared to most modern cameras, it's quite a simple looking menu system with way fewer options, although obviously there's no autofocusing, stabilization or video modes to configure. Looking around the body, you'll notice no flaps or doors, spoiling the nice clean design, and in fact the only connector is below the body, a USB-C port perched right on one side. This is used for charging, data transfer or tethering. And don't be fooled, that's not a door for the battery compartment alongside. Push the lever to the side and the entire battery pops out, although it's initially held in position until you give it a little push and then it pops all the way out, just like the Leica Q. Now Leica quotes roughly 240 shots per charge whether using the screen or EVF, so compare that to the M11 which is quoted at 700 shots, presumably thanks to the less power-hungry optical rangefinder. Put it this way, having only electronic composition on the EV1 is going to eat through your battery faster, of course. Once the battery pack is removed, you'll also find the SD card slot, although the EV1 also includes 64GB of internal memory. This means the SD card can be used instead of it, or for backup if you prefer. Note, if you want to transfer image files from the built-in memory though, the EV1's USB port annoyingly won't present that drive as a standard mass storage device. Instead, you'll need to import the images via an application. I used the Preview app on my Mac where it allowed me to import all the images to a folder of my choice. Finally, note the tripod thread located in line with the optical axis, as indeed it should be, and again, unlike many cameras, without any evidence of screws around it. At first glance, it's easy to miss these little touches, but over time you appreciate the simplicity and the cleanliness of the design. Okay, I can't leave it any longer, so let's now have a look at the viewfinder, and here I've filmed the actual panel in use. A sensor can automatically switch between it and the screen, or you can set it manually if you prefer, while a pop-out dial to the side can adjust it between -4 and +2 diopters. As you'd expect, it's respectable quality with 5.76 million dots and 0.76 times magnification. I believe that's the same as the Q3 models, and it is more detailed than the EVF accessory for the M11. The refresh is quoted a pretty unremarkable 60 frames per second though, which is lower than many rivals now offer, but I didn't notice it flickering or slow to catch up in use, so I'm fine with it. Now, Sony's best models do now sport high resolution EVF panels, sometimes with greater magnification too, and faster refresh rate options, although depending on their focusing mode, their display resolution can vary. In contrast, there's no gotchas with the EVF on the EV1, and it coincidentally shares a similar magnification to an M11's rangefinder, albeit of course with an electronic versus optical view. Which you prefer is entirely personal, although again the decision can be greatly influenced by your lenses and your style of taking pictures. Like when composing with the main screen, you can configure the front lever to toggle focus peaking and magnified assistance, and you can move the magnified area around using the joypad. Note, when composing with the screen, you can also move the magnified area by touch, but it sadly won't work as a touchpad when using the EVF, at least I couldn't get that to work. Also note the 2 digital zoom settings of 1.3 and 1.8 times, which crop the image, but during composition are indicated by a smaller white border or frame, allowing you to see what's happening outside of it, a bit like using a rangefinder, I guess. Now for the imaging, with the EV1 sporting a full-frame BSI sensor with 60.3 megapixels, coupled with Leica's Maestro 3 processor. I can't say for sure if it's the same sensor that Sony uses in their 60 megapixel models, but again, I do believe that Leica optimizes their sensors for the optical design of M lenses. You can record images as JPEG and or DNG RAW at 60, 36 or 18 megapixels. Note there's no JPEG compression settings or HIF options, while DNG RAWs are saved with lossless compression. There's no other options. Bonus points, by the way, though, for adopting DNG, which means you can start using those raw files as soon as you like without having to wait for converter updates. Content credentials with fields for copyright and produced by can also be recorded. JPEGs measure around 12 to 15 megabytes, while each DNG RAW typically measures between 60 and 90 megabytes. There's also burst shooting up to 4.5 frames per second, but this isn't designed as an action camera. There's also 5 film styles: standard, vivid, natural, monochrome, and high contrast monochrome, the latter a personal favourite. Right, I think it's time to have a look at some samples. Leica loaned me the EV1 with a Summicron M 35mm f2 aspherical lens to try out, but the lens was a little the worse for wear, so I'm unable as a consequence to present a detailed analysis of the quality, at least for now. But I will show you the samples I took nonetheless as I wrap up this review so far, and for reference you can also check out samples from the M11, which shares the same sensor and image processor. The Leica M EV1 essentially gives you an M11 with a built-in electronic viewfinder, so you're getting the design, build and 60 megapixel photo quality of one of their most desirable digital cameras, but with different eye-level composition. Since the M series is arguably defined by an optical rangefinder, switching it for an EVF is unsurprisingly going to polarize their user base. Indeed, at first I expect many will reject it on this alone, but remember this is not designed for their traditional owners and in no way represents a replacement strategy going forward. Instead, the EV1 is designed for different people and situations where a rangefinder becomes less accurate or harder to use, such as when shooting with ultra-wide or longer telephotos, as well as macro lenses or lenses with a very shallow depth of field. All of these are more easy to compose with and adjust using an electronic viewfinder with the chance for magnified assistance and focus peaking. Or, depending on your own eyesight, you may simply find it easier to use. And while Leica does have an EVF accessory for the M11, the EV1's is more detailed and doesn't interrupt that nice flat top surface. Once again, you can essentially match the photo quality at a way lower price from companies like Sony, while also having the option of autofocus, IBIS and video recording. Plus, I should add, these alternative models can also deliver a great manual focusing experience if that's what you desire. For example, exploiting face detection to place a magnified view right over someone's eye without scrolling around trying to find them. You're not going to find that on the EV1 because it doesn't have face detection. But as I said at the start, most of us already know how we feel about Leica's value proposition long before watching any videos about them. So tell me what you think in the comments. Are you a Leica fan? And if so, is the EV1 the model you've been waiting for? Or perhaps you prefer a fixed lens Q model? I personally was pretty fond of the Q343. And if I do have a chance to retest the EV1 or indeed an M11, let me know what you'd like to see in a follow-up video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.